Inheriting millions should be a blessing, but for these people, sudden wealth became a masterclass in how to honor a deceased relative's memory by destroying everything they worked for. Unlike lottery winners who just got lucky, these inheritors had the added pressure of family expectations, guilt about unearned money, and the responsibility of preserving someone else's life's work. Spoiler alert, they failed spectacularly at all three. 1. The lawyer's office fell silent as the numbers were read. $4.2 million from Great Aunt Gertrude, whom the inheritor had met exactly twice at family reunions. The first decision? Buying a mansion identical to Aunt Gertrude's 1940s home and furnishing it with period-accurate antiques, despite never having shown any interest in vintage decor and living in 2023. $800,000 went to recreating a dead woman's lifestyle, complete with hiring actors to portray Aunt Gertrude's deceased friends for dinner parties, where Depression-era recipes were served to confused guests who had no idea why they were eating boiled cabbage in a museum-quality dining room. 2. Grandpa Joe would have wanted me to live like a king, came the declaration, leading to the purchase of a literal castle in Scotland, complete with a moat, drawbridge, and medieval feast hall, where nightly banquets were hosted for anyone willing to dress in period costumes. The $3 million castle adventure included hiring a full staff of servants, learning to joust, and attempting to recreate 14th century court life, while the grandfather's actual dream had been owning a small hardware store in Ohio. 3. Guilt hit immediately after inheriting $6 million from a workaholic father, leading to quitting a perfectly good job to dedicate life to giving back by starting 17 different charities, none of which anyone knew how to run properly. The charitable empire included organizations for causes ranging from left-handed awareness to protecting endangered butterflies, each with elaborate fundraising events that cost more to organize than they raised. The philanthropy adventure resulted in spending $2 million on charity galas that collectively raised $23,000 for causes that didn't actually need help. 4. Family dinner became a war zone after one sibling inherited the entire $5.8 million estate, while the others got nothing, prompting a decision to share the wealth fairly by giving each family member exactly equal monthly allowances, like they were children receiving pocket money. The family allowance system included detailed budgets created for relatives who were functioning adults, monthly financial reviews where spending decisions were questioned, and performance evaluations that determined allowance increases. The family patronage program lasted 6 months before everyone stopped speaking, and the realization hit that both money and relationships had been lost. 5. The pet memorial reached unprecedented levels when $3.2 million was used to build a theme park dedicated to a deceased grandmother's beloved poodle, Duchess. The canine tribute included rides themed around dog activities, restaurants serving only pet-friendly food, and educational exhibits about poodle history that confused visitors who expected normal amusement park entertainment. Duchess Land attracted exactly 12 visitors in its first month of operation, all family members who felt obligated to support the bizarre memorial project. 6. Uncle Bill loved NASCAR, so I'm going to honor him by becoming a professional race car driver, came the announcement from someone who had never shown athletic ability beyond changing TV channels. The racing career consumed $4 million in training, equipment, and crashed vehicles before the realization hit that watching NASCAR and driving NASCAR were completely different skill sets. The racing tribute included hiring professional coaches, purchasing multiple race cars, and entering competitions with consistent last-place finishes, while explaining to confused reporters that the racing was to honor an uncle's memory, rather than actually win anything. 7. The business empire began when $7 million was inherited with a mission to buy every company a late husband had ever mentioned wanting to own, regardless of whether businesses were understood or actually for sale. The acquisition spree included a failed attempt to purchase McDonald's, a successful but ruinous purchase of a struggling laundromat chain, and a disastrous investment in a pyramid scheme that sold crystals to people who thought rocks had healing powers. The business tribute cost $3.5 million and left the inheritor owning 17 businesses that collectively lost money faster than it could be counted. 8. Home renovation reached architectural insanity when $4.5 million was used to transform a modest suburban house into an exact replica of the Taj Mahal. Despite living in Ohio and having no connection to Indian architecture beyond thinking it looked fancy enough for grandma's money. The architectural monument included hiring confused contractors to build minarets in the backyard, installing a reflection pool that violated city water ordinances, and creating marble corridors that made the house impossible to heat during Ohio winters. 9. Mother always said education was important, became the reasoning for enrolling in every graduate program available while using $3.8 million to fund simultaneous doctoral studies in 17 different fields. The academic empire included hiring tutors to attend classes when scheduling conflicts arose, paying other students to complete assignments, and essentially purchasing degrees in subjects with no intention of ever using them. The educational marathon cost $800,000 in tuition and resulted in becoming the most overeducated, unemployed person in the city's history. 10. The religious conversion happened overnight when $5.2 million was inherited from a devoutly Catholic aunt, leading to honoring her faith by building a private cathedral in the backyard, complete with stained glass windows, organ music, and daily services conducted personally, despite having no religious training. The spiritual tribute included self-ordination through an online ministry, purchasing religious artifacts that may or may not have been authentic, and hosting worship services that confused neighbors who weren't sure if they were witnessing religious devotion or elaborate performance art. 11. Fashion history became an expensive obsession when $6.3 million funded a mission to own every designer dress a late mother had ever admired in magazines from the 1960s. The Fashion Museum included hiring private detectives to track down specific garments, outbidding museums at auction houses, and creating climate-controlled closets for clothes that were too precious to wear because of their historical value. The fashion tribute resulted in owning 400 museum-quality dresses while having nothing appropriate to wear to normal social events. 12. The movie production began when $4.8 million was used to create a biographical epic about a grandfather's life as a small-town pharmacist, apparently believing that dispensing medication contained enough drama for a 3-hour cinematic experience. The Hollywood tribute included hiring professional actors, renting expensive equipment, and filming elaborate scenes about prescription filling that confused everyone involved in the production. The pharmaceutical epic cost $2.2 million to produce and was watched by exactly 8 people, including family members who felt obligated to attend the premiere. 13. Space exploration became a personal mission when science fiction fan Angela used her $5.7 million inheritance to fund her own private space program. Despite having no scientific background, beyond watching Star Trek reruns with her late uncle who had worked at NASA as a janitor, her astronaut training program included building a backyard rocket that violated numerous safety codes, hiring physics tutors to explain concepts she couldn't grasp, and attempting to launch herself into orbit using equipment she'd purchased from aerospace surplus stores. Angela's space program ended when the FAA explained that private space launches required permits she couldn't obtain and engineering knowledge she didn't possess. 14. The animal sanctuary expanded beyond reason when wildlife enthusiast George inherited $3.9 million and decided to honor his veterinarian father by rescuing every animal available for adoption within a 200-mile radius. His rescue operation included converting his property into a zoo that required professional staff, veterinary care that exceeded most people's medical budgets, and food costs that rivaled feeding a small army. George's animal tribute created a menagerie of 300 animals that required $50,000 monthly in care costs, while producing exactly zero revenue and numerous city code violations. 15. Time travel became a legitimate business venture when historian Patricia inherited $4.4 million and invested it all in developing technology to visit her deceased grandmother in the past. Despite time travel being impossible and her having no scientific qualifications beyond watching History Channel documentaries, her temporal research project included hiring confused physicists, purchasing expensive equipment that couldn't possibly work, and funding experiments that violated basic laws of physics. Patricia's time travel tribute consumed her entire inheritance, while producing results that wouldn't have impressed a middle school science fair. 16. The presidential campaign launched immediately after political enthusiast Mark inherited $6.1 million and decided to honor his civically minded aunt by running for president, despite having no political experience, policy positions, or understanding of how elections work. His political tribute included hiring campaign staff who tried to explain why his platform of making everyone rich like me wasn't a viable policy proposal, renting campaign headquarters in states where he wasn't eligible to appear on ballots, and hosting rallies that attracted more confused bystanders than actual supporters. Mark's presidential ambition cost $1.8 million and resulted in him receiving fewer votes than candidates who hadn't campaigned at all. 17. Professional sports became accessible when athletic dreamer Helen used her $3.6 million inheritance to purchase a minor league baseball team as tribute to her sports-loving father, despite knowing nothing about baseball beyond the fact that games involved hitting balls with sticks. Her team ownership included hiring coaches to teach her basic rules, attempting to play in games herself despite being 52 years old with no athletic experience, and implementing team strategies she'd learned from watching movies about baseball. Helen's sports tribute resulted in her team setting records for losses, while she learned that owning sports teams required understanding sports. 18. The music career exploded when tone-deaf William inherited $5.3 million and decided to become a professional recording artist to honor his late mother's love of music, despite being unable to sing, play instruments, or read music notation. His musical tribute included hiring producers to create albums where his vocals were so heavily processed they sounded like robot interpretations of human emotion, booking concert venues where audiences attended out of curiosity rather than appreciation, and releasing songs that achieved fame for being unintentionally hilarious rather than musically competent. Williams' recording career cost $900,000 and resulted in him becoming internet famous for all the wrong reasons. 19. Archaeological discovery became a personal quest when history buff Sandra inherited $4.7 million and used it to fund expeditions searching for historical artifacts related to her pioneer ancestors, despite having no archaeological training and searching in locations that had already been thoroughly excavated by qualified professionals. Her treasure hunting tribute included hiring confused archaeologists to supervise her amateur excavations, purchasing expensive metal detectors and excavation equipment, and organizing expeditions to sites where she was unlikely to find anything more significant than bottle caps and lost coins. Sandra's archaeological adventure produced exactly 0 historical discoveries, while costing $600,000 in expedition expenses. 20. The restaurant empire began when culinary disaster Eric inherited $3.4 million and opened a chain of restaurants serving only his late grandmother's recipes, despite the fact that Grandma's cooking had been notoriously terrible, and family members had politely endured her meals out of love rather than enjoyment. His culinary tribute included hiring professional chefs to recreate dishes that had never been good in the first place, marketing authentic family recipes that customers actively avoided, and operating restaurants where positive reviews came only from family members who felt obligated to support his memorial dining venture. Eric's restaurant chain lost money faster than customers could avoid eating there. 21. Scientific research consumed Rebecca's $6.8 million inheritance when she decided to fund a laboratory dedicated to studying her deceased scientist uncle's theory that plants could communicate through telepathy, despite this theory having been debunked by actual botanists who understood plant biology. Her research tribute included hiring confused graduate students to conduct experiments that couldn't produce meaningful results, purchasing laboratory equipment for research that violated basic scientific principles, and publishing papers that were rejected by every legitimate scientific journal. Rebecca's plant telepathy research consumed her inheritance, while advancing human knowledge by exactly 0%. 22. The fashion line launched when style-challenged Monica inherited $4.9 million and created a clothing brand inspired by her deceased aunt's 1970s wardrobe, apparently believing that fashions from 50 years ago would appeal to contemporary customers who had access to current clothing options. Her fashion tribute included designing clothes that looked like costume pieces from historical reenactments, marketing vintage styles to consumers who preferred modern fashion, and operating boutiques where clothes hung on racks for months without attracting buyers who weren't attending themed parties. Monica's fashion empire proved that some styles are better left in the past. 23. Transportation innovation became a mission when inventor wannabe James used his $5.4 million inheritance to develop revolutionary vehicles based on his late father's sketches of flying cars, despite these drawings being idle doodles rather than actual engineering plans. His automotive tribute included hiring engineers to build vehicles that couldn't possibly work, testing prototypes that violated numerous safety regulations, and attempting to patent inventions that had been tried and abandoned by actual automotive companies decades earlier. James's transportation revolution produced several expensive prototypes that couldn't transport anyone anywhere safely. 24. The publishing empire emerged when literary enthusiast Dorothy inherited $3.7 million and decided to publish every story, poem, and random note her late writer aunt had ever written, regardless of literary quality or public interest in amateur creative writing, from someone who had never been professionally published. Her literary tribute included hiring editors to improve unpublishable manuscripts, printing books that bookstores refused to stock, and marketing literature that appealed only to family members who felt obligated to purchase memorial publications. Dorothy's publishing venture proved that loving someone doesn't automatically make their writing worth reading. 25. Professional photography became accessible when camera enthusiast Paul inherited $4.1 million and opened a studio dedicated to recreating his late grandfather's amateur photo techniques, despite these methods being outdated and producing results that modern customers wouldn't accept for their important events. His photography tribute included purchasing vintage equipment that produced inferior results compared to contemporary technology, offering services that customers didn't want, and creating portraits that looked like historical artifacts rather than professional photography. Paul's photography business attracted customers only when modern photographers were unavailable, and desperate people needed any photographer at all. 26. The technology company launched when computer-illiterate Susan inherited $6.2 million and decided to honor her tech-savvy nephew by creating software applications, despite not understanding how computers worked beyond knowing that pressing buttons sometimes produced results. Her technology tribute included hiring programmers to create applications she couldn't describe coherently, developing software that solved problems nobody had, and marketing technology products to consumers who had better alternatives available for free. Susan's tech empire produced applications that were downloaded by fewer people than she had family members. 27. Entertainment production reached new heights when show business dreamer Carl inherited $5.6 million and created a traveling circus as tribute to his late father's love of carnival entertainment. Despite circuses being largely obsolete and Carl having no experience with live entertainment beyond watching performances as a customer, his circus tribute included hiring performers who were more confused than the audiences, purchasing equipment that violated modern safety standards, and creating shows that entertained people by being unintentionally absurd rather than professionally entertaining. Carl's circus adventure proved that some forms of entertainment are better left as memories. 28. The construction company emerged when building enthusiast Linda inherited $4.3 million and decided to honor her contractor father by starting a construction business. Despite having no construction experience beyond watching other people build things, and assuming that supervision was equivalent to expertise. Her construction tribute included bidding on projects she couldn't complete, hiring subcontractors to do work she couldn't evaluate, and creating buildings that required professional contractors to fix problems caused by her amateur construction management. Linda's construction empire proved that watching construction and doing construction were completely different skill sets. 29. Agricultural innovation became a personal mission when farming wannabe Robert inherited $3.8 million and used it to revolutionize agriculture through techniques his farmer grandfather had supposedly invented, but never shared with agricultural professionals who might have found them useful. His farming tribute included purchasing expensive equipment to implement growing methods that didn't work, hiring agricultural consultants to explain why his techniques violated basic botany principles, and producing crops that yielded less food than conventional farming methods while costing significantly more to grow. Robert's agricultural revolution proved that some innovations aren't improvements. 30. The transportation service launched when logistics dreamer Karen inherited $5.1 million and created a delivery company based on her late uncle's theories about optimal package routing, despite these theories being incompatible with actual geography and physics. Her delivery tribute included purchasing vehicles for routes that didn't make economic sense, hiring drivers to follow delivery schedules that violated time and space limitations, and offering services that customers didn't need at prices they wouldn't pay. Karen's delivery empire proved that theoretical logistics and practical logistics were different subjects entirely. 31. Professional sports coaching became accessible when athletic theorist Michael inherited $4.6 million and decided to honor his coach father by purchasing a semi-professional sports team and implementing revolutionary training methods he'd learned from sports documentaries rather than actual coaching education. His coaching tribute included hiring athletes to practice techniques that contradicted established sports science, implementing strategies that worked better in movies than in actual competitions, and creating training programs that produced results opposite to their intended effects. Michael's coaching career proved that watching sports and coaching sports required different skill sets entirely. 32. The real estate empire began when property enthusiast Nancy inherited $6.4 million and decided to honor her realtor mother by purchasing properties in locations that would definitely become valuable someday, despite these predictions being based on wishful thinking, rather than market analysis or urban planning knowledge. Her real estate tribute included buying houses in areas that were declining in value, investing in commercial properties that couldn't attract tenants, and developing land that couldn't be developed due to zoning restrictions she'd never researched. Nancy's property empire proved that real estate success required more than optimistic predictions about future value. 33. Scientific invention became a personal quest when gadget enthusiast David inherited $3.5 million and used it to develop revolutionary devices based on his inventor uncle's rejected patent applications, despite these inventions being rejected for valid reasons related to physics, practicality, or market demand. His invention tribute included hiring engineers to build devices that couldn't work as intended, applying for patents on improvements to inventions that had never worked in the first place, and marketing products that solved problems people didn't actually have. David's invention career proved that some ideas are rejected because they deserve to be rejected. 34. The entertainment venue opened when party enthusiast Lisa inherited $5.9 million and created a nightclub designed to recreate the social atmosphere her late aunt had described from her youth. Despite social entertainment having evolved significantly since the 1950s and modern customers having different expectations for nightlife experiences, her entertainment tribute included hiring bands to play music that contemporary audiences didn't recognize, serving drinks that hadn't been popular for decades, and creating an atmosphere that appealed primarily to people who were nostalgic for times they'd never actually experienced. Lisa's nightclub attracted customers mainly on novelty value rather than repeat business. 35. The educational institution emerged when learning enthusiast Thomas inherited $4.8 million and opened a private school based on educational theories his teacher grandmother had never been allowed to implement in actual schools. despite these theories being impractical for real educational environments and incompatible with modern learning requirements. His educational tribute included hiring teachers to implement curricula that didn't prepare students for standardized tests or college admission, creating learning environments that confused students more than they educated them, and offering educational services that parents couldn't justify choosing over conventional schools. Thomas's educational experiment proved that some teaching theories remain theoretical for good reasons. 36. Professional consulting became accessible when advice giver Patricia inherited $3.9 million and created a business consulting firm based on management principles her executive father had discussed at family dinners. Despite these casual conversations being insufficient preparation for actually advising businesses about complex operational challenges, her consulting tribute included offering advice to companies about problems she'd never encountered professionally, implementing solutions that worked better in theory than in practice, and charging consultation fees for expertise she'd acquired through family anecdotes rather than professional experience. Patricia's consulting career proved that understanding business problems and solving business problems were different capabilities entirely. 37. The media empire launched when communication enthusiast Richard inherited $6.7 million and created a television network dedicated to programming his journalist grandfather would have approved of. Despite television content having evolved significantly since the 1940s and modern audiences having different entertainment preferences than people from previous generations, his media tribute included producing shows that addressed issues people no longer considered relevant, broadcasting content that appealed mainly to viewers who were nostalgic for earlier eras, and creating programming that attracted audiences, primarily through curiosity rather than genuine interest. Richard's television network proved that successful media required understanding contemporary audiences rather than historical preferences. 38. The Research Foundation began when academic wannabe Margaret inherited $5.2 million and established an institute dedicated to studying subjects her professor uncle had found intellectually interesting. Despite these topics being too obscure for practical application, and too specialized for general academic interest, her research tribute included hiring scholars to investigate questions that didn't need answering, funding studies that couldn't produce useful results, and publishing research that advanced human knowledge in areas where advancement wasn't particularly valuable. Margaret's Research Foundation proved that intellectual curiosity and practical research were different approaches to learning. 39. Transportation innovation reached new levels when logistics dreamer Charles inherited $4.4 million and developed revolutionary shipping methods based on his delivery driver father's complaints about inefficient routing systems. Despite these complaints being based on frustration rather than comprehensive understanding of transportation logistics and economic constraints, his shipping tribute included purchasing vehicles for delivery systems that cost more than they saved, implementing routing strategies that took longer than conventional methods, and offering services that solved problems customers hadn't known they had and didn't particularly want solved. Charles's transportation revolution proved that complaints about systems and improvements to systems were different forms of expertise. 40. The manufacturing company emerged when production enthusiast Helen inherited $3.6 million and created a factory dedicated to producing items her craftsman grandfather had made by hand. Despite mass production requiring different techniques than individual craftsmanship and modern consumers having different quality expectations than people from previous eras, her manufacturing tribute included hiring workers to produce goods using methods that were inefficient for large-scale production, creating products that cost more to manufacture than customers would pay, and operating a factory that produced items people could purchase more affordably from established manufacturers. Helen's manufacturing venture proved that handicraft skills and industrial production were different approaches to making things. 41. Professional entertainment became accessible when performance enthusiast Daniel inherited $5.8 million and created an entertainment company featuring acts his performer aunt had described from her career. Despite entertainment preferences having changed significantly since her era, and modern audiences having different expectations for professional performances, His entertainment tribute included hiring performers to recreate acts that contemporary audiences didn't find engaging, booking venues for shows that attracted customers mainly through novelty rather than genuine entertainment value, and producing performances that were more interesting as historical curiosities than as contemporary entertainment. Daniel's entertainment company proved that successful performance required understanding current audiences rather than historical entertainment preferences. 42. The service business launched when hospitality enthusiast Joyce inherited $4.2 million and created a customer service company based on principles her hotel manager mother had discussed about treating guests well. Despite customer service having evolved significantly beyond basic hospitality and modern service industries having different operational requirements than traditional hospitality businesses. Her service tribute included offering customer care that was more expensive than clients needed, implementing service standards that were incompatible with contemporary business efficiency, and providing assistance that customers appreciated but weren't willing to pay premium prices to receive. Joyce's service business proved that good intentions and profitable services were different approaches to helping people. 43. The development company began when urban planning enthusiast Kenneth inherited $6.5 million and created a community development firm based on his city planner father's ideas about ideal neighborhood design. Despite urban development having become significantly more complex than residential planning and modern communities having different infrastructure requirements than previous generations, his development tribute included planning communities that couldn't be built within contemporary zoning restrictions, designing neighborhoods that appealed to planners but not to actual residents, and creating development projects that satisfied theoretical urban planning principles but couldn't attract people who wanted to live in them. Kenneth's development company proved that planning theory and practical development were different approaches to creating communities. 44. The investment firm emerged when financial enthusiast Linda inherited $7.3 million and created an investment company based on strategies her banker grandfather had mentioned during family conversations. Despite investment management having become significantly more complex than traditional banking and modern financial markets, having different characteristics than historical investment environments, her investment tribute included offering portfolio management based on outdated financial principles, implementing investment strategies that had worked in different economic conditions but weren't suitable for contemporary markets, and providing financial advice that was historically sound but currently irrelevant. Linda's investment firm proved that understanding historical finance and managing contemporary investments were different forms of financial expertise. 45. And finally, there's the inheritor who received $8.2 million and decided to honor every deceased relative simultaneously by creating a comprehensive memorial empire that included businesses, charities, educational institutions, and entertainment venues, dedicated to preserving each family member's memory through elaborate tributes that cost more than the inheritance could support. The universal memorial strategy included opening a restaurant serving grandmother's recipes, a construction company using uncle's techniques, a school implementing aunt's educational theories, a research institute studying father's interests, and an entertainment venue recreating cousins' party planning ideas. The comprehensive family tribute empire required managing 17 different businesses simultaneously while honoring conflicting memorial requirements that made each venture less effective than focused individual tributes would have been. The memorial empire consumed the entire inheritance within 2 years, while failing to successfully honor anyone's memory, because divided attention prevented any single tribute from succeeding. The comprehensive commemoration strategy proved that trying to honor everyone's memory equally resulted in honoring no one's memory effectively, and that the best tribute to deceased relatives would have been using their money wisely rather than spending it elaborately. Here's the brutal truth about inherited wealth. The people who earned it usually understood money better than the people who received it. These inheritors discovered that guilt, love, and good intentions are poor substitutes for financial wisdom and business experience. The most expensive way to honor someone's memory is to waste the money they spent their lifetime accumulating. Want to properly honor a relative who left you money? Use it wisely. Want to disappoint them from beyond the grave? Turn their life's work into your expensive hobby. Subscribe if you'd rather learn from other people's inheritance disasters than create your own memorial to financial irresponsibility.